The research vessel Endeavour shook violently as it fell through the thick atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair while sparks flew from damaged control panels around the bridge. The ship's navigation system had failed 3 hours ago, and now they were heading straight toward the planet's surface with no way to stop. "Emergency landing protocols now," Jake shouted over the screaming alarms. "All crew to crash positions." Dr. Emma Roberts strapped herself into her seat in the science bay. She had spent 2 years preparing for this mission to study alien life forms. This was not how she had imagined making first contact with a new world. Through the small window, she could see endless green forests rushing up to meet them. The ship hit the ground hard. Emma felt her body slam against the safety straps as the Endeavour skidded through tall trees and thick undergrowth. Metal groaned and twisted as the hull scraped against rocks and fallen logs. Finally, after what felt like forever, everything went quiet. "Sound off, everyone." Jake's voice came through the damaged communication system. "Report your status." 1. By 1, the 12 crew members called in. Engineer Tom Bradley had a broken arm. Nurse Patricia Wells was treating a deep cut on Communications Officer David Park's forehead. Everyone else had minor injuries. They were alive, but their ship was destroyed. "The distress beacon is damaged," reported Lisa Chen from the communication station. "I can fix it, but it will take days, maybe weeks." Jake stepped outside the broken ship and looked around. The Endeavour had carved a long scar through the forest floor. Tall purple trees surrounded them, their leaves making soft clicking sounds in the alien breeze. Strange bird-like creatures flew overhead, calling to each other in musical voices. "We're stuck here until rescue arrives," Jake told his crew. "That could be 6 weeks or more. We need to set up a camp and make this place defendable." The crew worked through the day to salvage what they could from the ship. Tom Bradley and engineer Kate Wilson managed to get emergency power running. Dr. Roberts collected samples of local plants to test for toxins. Security Chief Robert Davis and Marine Sergeant Mike Sullivan started building a protective barrier around their camp using pieces of the ship's hull. As the sun began to set, the forest changed. The cheerful birdsong stopped. The clicking leaves went silent. A low growling sound echoed through the trees, getting closer. "Everyone inside the perimeter," Mike Sullivan ordered. "Something's coming." The first creature emerged from the shadows, between the trees. It stood 8 feet tall on powerful legs. Its body was covered in thick gray fur, and sharp black spines ran along its back like a hedge of daggers. Yellow eyes glowed in the darkness as it studied the humans with clear intelligence. "Dear God," Dr. Roberts whispered. "It's magnificent." More of the creatures appeared. Emma counted at least 6 of them surrounding the camp. Their massive heads were like wolves, but larger and more frightening. Each one weighed probably 500 pounds of pure muscle and predator instinct. "Thornbacks," she said, remembering the preliminary scans from orbit. "The apex predators of this planet." The largest thornback, probably the pack leader, stepped forward. It sniffed the air and made a deep rumbling sound. The others spread out, clearly preparing to attack. "Weapons, ready," Mike Sullivan commanded, "but do not fire unless I give the order." The attack came fast. The thornbacks rushed the camp from 3 directions at once. Mike opened fire with his plasma rifle, the bright energy bolts lighting up the forest. Tom Bradley grabbed a metal pipe and swung it at a creature trying to climb over their barrier. Kate Wilson screamed as massive claws raked across the hull plate she was hiding behind. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. The thornbacks were smart fighters. They worked together, using pack tactics to confuse and overwhelm their prey. But the humans had technology and desperation on their side. Mike's accurate shooting drove back 2 of the larger predators. Captain Morrison used an emergency flare to scare another one away from Patricia Wells. The bright red light and loud noise seemed to hurt the creature's sensitive eyes and ears. Finally, the pack leader called out with a long, deep howl. "Thumti." Other thornbacks retreated into the forest, melting back into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. The humans were left breathing hard in their damaged camp, counting their wounds and their luck. "Is everyone alive?" Jake called out. They were all injured but breathing. More importantly, they had survived their first test on this alien world. But as Dr. Roberts was checking on Patricia's scratched shoulder, she heard something that made her stop. Soft whimpering sounds were coming from near the crashed ship. Not human sounds. Something else. "There's something over there," she told Mike Sullivan. "Behind the engine section." Mike raised his rifle and approached carefully. Emma followed, despite his gestures for her to stay back. She was the xenobiologist on this mission. Understanding alien life was her job. Behind the twisted metal of the engine housing, they found 3 small thornbacks. These were not the massive adults that had attacked them. These were babies no bigger than earthwolves. Their spines were soft and flexible, not yet hardened into weapons. One had a bleeding cut on its leg. Another was limping from a twisted paw. "They must have gotten separated from the pack during the fight," Emma said quietly. "They're hurt and scared." The cubs saw the humans approaching and huddled together, making frightened, squeaking noises. But they did not run. They did not attack. They just watched with large, intelligent eyes that seemed far too knowing for such young creatures. "We should drive them away," Mike said. "Their parents will come back looking for them." But Dr. Roberts was already kneeling down, moving slowly, and speaking in a gentle voice. The wounded cub lifted its head and sniffed in her direction. For just a moment, their eyes met across the space between species. "No," she said softly. "I think we should help them." That decision would change everything, for both species, though none of them knew it yet. Dr. Emma Roberts knelt beside the injured cubs for 3 hours that first night. She used her medical scanner to check their wounds while speaking in soft, calm voices. The smallest cub, the one with the hurt leg, slowly stopped whimpering. It even let her clean the cut with antiseptic. "This is insane," Security Chief Robert Davis said from behind the safety barrier. "Those things will grow up to be killers. We should chase them away now while we still can." Captain Jake Morrison watched Emma work. He had seen her handle dangerous animals before during their training on Earth. She had a gift for understanding creatures that others feared. "Give her until morning," Jake decided. "If the cubs are still here when the sun comes up, we will make a decision then." But the cubs did not leave when morning came. They stayed close to the damaged ship, watching everything the humans did. The largest cub, which Emma started calling Scout, followed Tom Bradley around while he worked on repairing their equipment. The middle cub, Hunter, sat near the communications array where Lisa Chen was trying to fix their distress beacon. The smallest cub, Shadow, stayed close to Nurse Patricia Wells. Patricia was still recovering from the scratches she got during the attack. Every time she moved too fast and winced from pain, Shadow would make soft, worried sounds and try to nudge her gently with its nose. "Look at this," Emma called everyone over to observe. "Shadow knows Patricia is hurt. It's trying to comfort her." Mike Sullivan shook his head. "Animals react to weakness. Maybe it thinks she is easy prey." But Emma had been watching all morning. This was not hunting behavior. The cubs brought the humans gifts. Scout dragged over shiny pieces of metal from the forest floor. Hunter found colorful stones and dropped them near the cooking fire. Shadow brought Patricia a purple flower that smelled like honey. "They are trying to help us," Emma explained to the gathered crew. "This is social bonding behavior. They see us as part of their pack now." The truth of her words became clear on the second day. The cubs refused to eat the food Emma offered them. Instead, they disappeared into the forest and returned hours later dragging a dead animal that looked like a cross between a deer and a rabbit. They dropped it in the center of the human camp and stepped back, looking proud. "They are sharing their kill with us," Tom Bradley said in amazement. "I have read about earthwolves doing this, but only with their own family members." Kate Wilson wrinkled her nose at the strange alien meat. "How do we know it is safe to eat?" Dr. Roberts ran the meat through every scanner they had. "It is clean. No toxins, no diseases. The protein structure is actually very similar to Earth beef." That evening, humans and cubs shared their first meal together. Emma cooked the alien meat over their campfire while the cubs watched with intense interest. They seemed fascinated by the use of fire and tools. Scout tried to pick up a metal cooking spoon with its teeth and carry it around. The cubs also led the humans to a freshwater stream hidden deep in the forest. Without their guidance, the crew might never have found it. The water was clean and cold, flowing down from mountains they could see in the distance. They know this territory better than any map, Captain Morrison realized. They are not just staying with us. They are taking care of us. On the third day, something happened that changed everything. David Park was working alone on the communications equipment when he accidentally triggered a feedback loop in the circuits. The system overloaded and caught fire, sending up black smoke and dangerous sparks. David called for help, but the rest of the crew was scattered around the camp working on other repairs. Only Hunter was nearby, watching David work from a few feet away. When the fire started, the young Thornback did something no one expected. Hunter grabbed a metal container in its teeth and ran to the stream. It filled the container with water and brought it back to David, who used it to put out the electrical fire before it could spread. "Did that cub just help me fight a fire?" David asked when the others came running. Emma studied the scorch marks in wet metal. There was no doubt about what had happened. Hunter had understood the danger, found a solution, and acted to protect a human being. "It saved your equipment," she said quietly. "Maybe even your life." The crew began paying closer attention to the cubs after that. They noticed how Scout would bark warnings when dangerous animals approached the camp. Hunter learned to recognize the sound of their tools and would bring the right equipment when someone was working. Shadow always positioned herself between the humans and any potential threats from the forest. But the most amazing discovery came on the fourth day. Communications officer Lisa Chen was trying to establish a better signal with their damaged beacon. She was making frustrated sounds and gestures as she worked. Hunter watched her for a long time. Then it began copying her movements. When Lisa pointed at a broken component, Hunter pointed with its nose in the same direction. When she shook her head in disappointment, Hunter tilted its head and made a questioning sound. "It is trying to communicate with me," Lisa said in wonder. "Look, it understands that I am trying to tell it something." Emma documented everything in her research logs. "These cubs are showing intelligence levels far beyond what we expected. They are adapting to us faster than we are adapting to them." On the fifth night, the adult Thornbacks returned. The cubs heard them howling in the distance long before the humans noticed anything. But instead of running toward the sound of their pack, the cubs moved closer to the humans. Scout, Hunter, and Shadow formed a protective line between the campfire and the dark forest. When the adult Thornbacks appeared at the edge of the firelight, the cubs did something that left everyone speechless. They growled at their own parents, warning them to stay away from the humans. "This is impossible," Robert Davis whispered. "They are choosing us over their own species." The adult Thornbacks called to their young with deep, mournful sounds. The cubs answered back, but they did not move from their protective positions. After an hour of this long-distance conversation, the adults retreated back into the forest. "We have changed them," Emma said as she watched the cubs settle down around the human camp for another night. "And I think they are changing us too." None of them slept well that night, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges in their growing relationship with these remarkable alien beings. Dr. Emma Roberts stared at the scanner readings in disbelief. She had been studying the cubs' brain activity for a week now, and what she was seeing should have been impossible. The neural pathways in their minds were changing faster than any creature she had ever studied. "Tom, come look at this," she called to engineer Tom Bradley, who was teaching Scout how to sort metal pieces by size. "You need to see what is happening inside their brains." Tom walked over to Emma's makeshift laboratory, wiping grease from his hands. Scout followed him, carrying a small wrench in its mouth like a proud retriever. The cub had learned to bring Tom tools before he even asked for them. "What am I looking at?" Tom asked, studying the brain scan images on Emma's portable screen. "These are Scout's brain patterns from 5 days ago?" Emma pointed to the first set of images. "And these are from this morning. Look at the difference." The second scan showed bright new connections forming between different parts of Scout's brain. Areas that controlled memory, problem-solving, and social behavior were lighting up with activity that had not been there before. "It looks like the brain is rewiring itself," Tom said slowly. Is that even possible? Not in any Earth species I know, Emma replied. But these cubs are developing new ways of thinking just from being around us. They are literally evolving their intelligence in real time. She showed him similar scans from Hunter and Shadow. All three cubs displayed the same rapid brain development. New neural pathways were forming every day, allowing them to understand human behavior and respond in ways their species had never shown before. Hunter has developed pattern recognition abilities that rival our computers, Emma explained. Yesterday I watched it solve a puzzle that would challenge most human children. And Shadow has begun showing empathy responses that we only see in the most advanced Earth mammals. Captain Jake Morrison joined them, looking tired from another night of little sleep. The responsibility of keeping his crew alive on this alien world was wearing on him. But the cubs had made their situation much easier. They warned of dangers, found food and water, and had even helped repair equipment. What does this mean for us? Jake asked after Emma explained her findings. It means we are witnessing something that has never happened before in the history of space exploration, Emma said. Two intelligent species are adapting to each other so quickly that evolution is happening in days instead of millions of years. She pulled up video recordings of the cubs' behavior over the past week. The footage showed Scout learning to use simple tools by watching the humans work. Hunter had developed a basic sign language, combining human gestures with natural thornback body movements. Shadow could predict when someone was about to get hurt or sick, somehow reading subtle changes in human body language. They are not just bonding with us, Emma continued. They are becoming something new, a bridge between our species. Engineer Kate Wilson approached the group looking concerned. She had been working with Lisa Chen to repair their long-range communications equipment, but they had discovered a serious problem. We need to talk, Kate said quietly. All of us together. There is something the cubs need to know. The crew gathered around their campfire as the alien sun began to set. The cubs took their usual protective positions around the humans, with Scout sitting closest to the fire, and Shadow keeping watch toward the forest. Hunter positioned itself where it could see both the humans and the darkness beyond their camp. Our rescue ship is coming, Kate announced. Lisa managed to get a message through to Earth Fleet Command this afternoon. They will be here in 12 days. The crew should have been happy about this news, but instead they looked troubled. Living with the cubs had changed them just as much as it had changed the alien creatures. The thought of leaving felt wrong somehow. What happens to Scout, Hunter, and Shadow when we go? Asked Nurse Patricia Wells. Shadow was resting its large head against her leg, something the cub did every evening, while Patricia recovered from her injuries. Earth's quarantine protocols are very clear, Captain Morrison said heavily. We cannot bring alien life forms back to our home planet. The risk of contamination is too great. But we cannot just abandon them either, Mike Sullivan added. The tough Marine had grown surprisingly attached to the cubs, especially Scout, who had saved his life twice by warning him about dangerous predators in the forest. Dr. Roberts had been thinking about this problem for days. There might be another option, she said carefully. I could request permission to stay behind and continue studying them, establish a permanent research station. That is a big sacrifice, Tom Bradley said. You would be giving up your life on Earth. Would I be? Emma asked, watching Scout play with a piece of rope trying to tie knots the way it had seen humans do. Or would I be gaining something even more valuable, the chance to help two species learn from each other? The conversation was interrupted by sounds from the forest. The adult thornbacks were calling again, their deep voices echoing through the trees. But tonight something was different. Instead of the mournful howls they had heard before, these calls sounded curious, almost questioning. The cubs responded with their own vocalizations, but they did not move from their positions around the human camp. Scout made a series of complex sounds that seemed to include both thornback language and attempts at human words. Hunter gestured toward the fire with its nose, then looked back toward the forest where its parents were calling. They are trying to explain us to their pack, Emma realized. They are telling their parents about humans. Shadow suddenly stood up and walked to the edge of their camp. It called out in a long musical voice that was unlike any sound they had heard from the cubs before. Then it returned to Patricia's side and settled down again. "What was that about?" Patricia asked, stroking Shadow's soft fur. Emma checked her scanner readings one more time. The cubs' brain activity was off the charts. Whatever was happening in their minds, it was bigger than anything she had imagined. "I think Shadow just invited their parents to meet us properly," she said quietly. "Tomorrow we might have our first real diplomatic contact between humans and Thornbacks." The crew spent the rest of the evening preparing for what might be the most important day in the history of interspecies relations. None of them could sleep, knowing that the cubs had just changed everything once again. The morning sun was barely visible through the purple forest canopy when the adult Thornbacks appeared. Dr. Emma Roberts counted 6 massive creatures emerging from between the trees, moving with the careful grace of apex predators. But unlike their first violent encounter, these Thornbacks approached slowly, stopping just outside the human camp perimeter. The largest female, clearly the pack leader, fixed her intelligent yellow eyes on the 3 cubs. She made a low rumbling, sound that seemed to carry both authority and confusion. Scout, Hunter, and Shadow responded immediately, running toward their mother with excited chirping noises. "They are going back to their pack," Security Chief Robert Davis said with relief. "This whole crazy situation is finally over." But Emma watched more carefully as the reunion unfolded. The cubs reached their parents and touched noses in greeting, but after only a few minutes they turned around and walked back to the humans. The adult Thornbacks followed partway, then stopped again at the edge of the camp. "No," Emma said quietly. "They are not leaving us. They are trying to bring their parents and the humans together." Scout positioned himself exactly halfway between Captain Jake Morrison and the pack leader. The young Thornback looked back and forth between human and adult Thornback, making a series of complex sounds that seemed to include both species' languages. Hunter began demonstrating the simple sign, language it had developed with the humans. It pointed to Tom Bradley, then made a gesture that meant friend. It pointed to the damaged ship, then made another gesture that meant help. The adult Thornbacks watched these displays with obvious fascination. Shadow did something even more remarkable. She picked up one of the metal tools the humans had been using and carried it to her mother. Then she returned and brought her mother one of the flowers she always gave to Nurse Patricia Wells. She was sharing the gifts that represented both species. They are acting as translators, Emma realized. The cubs understand both cultures now. They are trying to teach their parents about humans. The pack leader stepped forward cautiously. She sniffed the air around the human camp, taking in the sense of technology, cooked food, and human bodies. Her massive head tilted as she studied the strange creatures that had somehow adopted her children. Mike Sullivan kept his hand near his weapon, but Jake Morrison gestured for him to stay calm. This was a delicate moment that could determine the future relationship between the 2 species. Scout ran back to his mother and began making urgent sounds while pointing toward Tom Bradley. The engineer was working on a piece of damaged equipment, struggling to reach a component that was just out of his grasp. Scout seemed to be explaining the problem to his mother. The pack leader watched for several minutes as Tom tried different tools and positions. Then, incredibly, she stepped forward into the human camp. The crew held their breath as the massive predator approached Tom Bradley. Using her powerful claws with surprising gentleness, the pack leader reached into the machinery and extracted the component Tom needed. She dropped it at his feet, then stepped back and waited. Tom stared at the part, then at the enormous Thornback who had just helped him. "Thank you," he said simply, holding up the component. The pack leader tilted her head at the sound of human speech. Scout immediately began chattering at her in Thornback language, apparently translating Tom's words. Over the next several hours, more adult Thornbacks emerged from the forest. Emma counted 12 of them eventually, the entire pack. They brought gifts for the humans, shiny stones, rare plants, and pieces of crystalline minerals that caught the light beautifully. Hunter organized these gifts, sorting them by type and showing the humans which plants were safe to eat and which stones were valuable. The young Thornback had become a cultural ambassador, teaching both species about the other. "Look at this," Communications Officer Lisa Chen called out. She had been working on their beacon when one of the adult thornbacks approached her. The creature had brought her a strange metallic rock that resonated with a clear musical tone when tapped. "It is a natural crystal that conducts electromagnetic energy," Emma said after scanning the rock. "They somehow knew you needed better conducting materials for your equipment." The adult thornbacks were not just bringing random gifts. They were providing exactly what the humans needed to repair their technology. Somehow, through the cubs' translations, they understood what the humans were trying to accomplish. As the day progressed, the two species began working together. Adult thornbacks helped move heavy debris while humans shared their tools and knowledge. The cubs ran back and forth between the groups, translating and explaining and keeping everyone focused on cooperation instead of fear. But the most amazing moment came when Tom Bradley finally got their long-range communicator working. The device activated with a burst of static, then began receiving signals from space. "This is Earth Fleet Rescue Ship Aurora calling Endeavor," a voice crackled through the speakers. "We have received your distress signal. Our estimated arrival. Time is 5 days. Please respond if you can hear this message." The crew cheered at the news, but Emma noticed the cubs' reaction. Scout, Hunter, and Shadow immediately became agitated. They began making distressed sounds and pressing close to their human friends. "They understand," Patricia Wells said as Shadow pushed against her legs anxiously. "They know what rescue means. They know we will leave them." The pack leader watched her children's distress with obvious concern. She approached Captain Morrison, directly studying his face with those intelligent yellow eyes. Then she did something no one expected. She sat down in front of Jake and made a low, questioning sound. It was clearly a communication attempt, an effort to understand what was happening to her children and the strange creatures they had chosen to love. Scout immediately began translating, chattering rapidly between human and thornback languages. The conversation that followed would change everything for both species. "I think," Emma said slowly, "we are about to have our first real diplomatic negotiation with an alien intelligence." The rescue ship Aurora appeared as a bright star in the alien sky 3 days later. Dr. Emma Roberts watched through binoculars as the sleek vessel descended toward their coordinates, leaving a trail of blue engine fire against the purple clouds. Scout, Hunter, and Shadow had barely eaten since the radio contact. The cubs seemed to understand that the approaching ship meant separation from their human family. Scout kept bringing Tom Bradley broken pieces of equipment, as if trying to give him reasons to stay and keep working. Hunter refused to leave Lisa. Chen sighed, following her everywhere with sad, worried eyes. Shadow was the most heartbroken of all. She had stopped playing and exploring, instead spending all her time pressed against Nurse Patricia Wells. Every few hours, Shadow would look up at the sky and make a long, mournful sound that made everyone's chest tight with emotion. "We have to do something," Patricia said to Captain Jake Morrison. "Look at them. They think we are abandoning them forever." The adult thornbacks seemed to sense their children's distress. The pack leader had remained close to the human camp for the past 3 days, watching her cubs grow more miserable as the rescue ship approached. Several times, she tried to coax them back into the forest, but they refused to leave their human friends. "The cubs have fundamentally changed," Emma explained to the gathered crew. "Their brains have rewired themselves to see humans as family. Taking that away from them now could cause permanent psychological damage." Engineer Kate Wilson looked up from her calculations. "But Earth's quarantine protocols exist for good reasons. We cannot bring alien organisms back to our home planet. The contamination risk is too great." "Then maybe some of us should not go back," Tom Bradley said quietly. "Maybe some of us should stay here with them." Captain Morrison had been wrestling with this decision for days. As the mission commander, his duty was to bring his crew home safely. But as a human being, he could see the suffering the cubs would endure if they were abandoned. "Admiral Johnson is commanding the Aurora," Jake said finally. "She is a reasonable person. Maybe we can convince her to authorize a permanent research station here." The rescue ship landed in a clearing half a mile from their camp, sending up clouds of dust and startling the local wildlife. Emma watched through her scanner as figures in environmental suits emerged from the ship and began walking toward them. Admiral Sarah Johnson was a stern woman in her 50s who had commanded more rescue missions than anyone in Earth Fleet. She approached the human camp with military precision, flanked by 4 Marines in full combat gear. But she stopped short when she saw the Thornbacks. 12 massive predators were arranged around the human camp in what was clearly a protective formation. The cubs stood directly between the newcomers and their human friends, bristling with anxiety. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Johnson said carefully, keeping her eyes on the adult Thornbacks. "Your distress signal mentioned alien contact, but you did not mention armed predators surrounding your position." "They are not armed, Admiral," Jake replied. "They are our allies. These creatures have kept us alive for the past 2 weeks." Admiral Johnson studied the scene with professional skepticism. Then Scout did something that changed her entire perspective. The young Thornback approached her slowly, carrying a beautiful crystal in its mouth. It dropped the stone at her feet and stepped back, making a soft, welcoming sound. "It brought me a gift," the Admiral said in surprise. Hunter immediately began its sign language routine, pointing to the Admiral, then making the gesture for friend. Shadow picked up one of her favorite flowers and offered it to the newcomers. "They are trying to welcome you," Emma explained. "The cubs have learned human social customs. They see gift-giving as a way to show friendship." Admiral Johnson knelt down and accepted the flower from Shadow. The young Thornback immediately brightened, making happy chirping sounds and running in a small circle around the Admiral. "This is extraordinary," Admiral Johnson admitted. "In 30 years of space exploration, I have never seen anything like this level of interspecies cooperation." Emma spent the next hour explaining everything they had discovered about the cubs' rapid brain development and their role as bridges between species. She showed the Admiral brain scan data, behavioral recordings, and the remarkable progress the cubs had made in understanding human technology and culture. "The cubs are not just intelligent," Emma concluded. "They represent a completely new form of consciousness that combines human and Thornback thinking patterns. We are witnessing the birth of a hybrid intelligence." Admiral Johnson studied the data carefully. As a scientist herself before joining the military, she understood the unprecedented nature of what she was seeing. "The quarantine protocols still apply," she said finally. "I cannot authorize taking these creatures to Earth, but I might be able to authorize something else." She activated her communicator and spoke to her ship. "This is Admiral Johnson to Aurora Command. I need an immediate priority communication with Earth Fleet Headquarters. Authorization code Johnson 77 Alpha." The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. Emma watched nervously as the Admiral explained the situation to officials back on Earth. Several times, Admiral Johnson had to repeat herself, as if the people on the other end could not believe what they were hearing. Finally, Admiral Johnson closed the communication and turned back to the gathered crew. "Earth Fleet Command has approved the establishment of Research Station Alpha," she announced. "We will be leaving behind essential supplies, a permanent communication array, and a small fusion reactor. Any crew members who volunteer to stay will be supported by regular supply missions." The cubs seemed to sense that something important was happening. They gathered around their human friends, looking hopeful for the first time in days. "I will stay," Emma said immediately. "This research is too important to abandon." "Count me in too," Tom Bradley added. "These cubs have taught me more about engineering cooperation than 20 years of human projects." Mike Sullivan surprised everyone by volunteering third. "Someone needs to keep you scientists alive," he said gruffly. "Besides, Scout saved my life twice. I owe him that much." "Admiral." Johnson nodded approvingly. 3 volunteers should be sufficient to begin operations. We will establish regular contact schedules and supply drops every 6 months. As the decision was made, Scout, Hunter, and Shadow began celebrating in their own way. They ran around the camp, bringing gifts to everyone and making joyful sounds that their parents answered from the forest edge. The pack leader approached Admiral Johnson one final time. The massive Thornback looked directly into her eyes and made a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to carry the weight of gratitude from an entire species. "I think she is saying thank you," Emma said softly. Admiral Johnson nodded respectfully to the pack leader. "No, Dr. Roberts. I think we should be thanking them. They have given us something much more valuable than we are giving them." "What is that?" Emma asked. "Hope," Admiral Johnson replied. "Hope that different species can learn to live together as family." 2 years later, Dr. Emma Roberts stood on the observation deck of Research Station Alpha and watched an impossible sight. In the valley below, human children and young thornbacks played together in the morning sunlight, their laughter and chirping, creating a symphony of interspecies joy. Scout, now fully grown and standing nearly 7 feet tall, was teaching a group of human and thornback youngsters how to build simple machines using both human tools and natural materials. His massive claws worked with surprising delicacy as he demonstrated how to weave metal wire through carved wood pieces. Hunter had become the station's official translator and diplomat. The adult thornback wore a specially designed communication device that converted his complex vocalizations into human speech patterns. He spent his days facilitating trade agreements between human colonists and thornback packs from across the continent. Shadow, the smallest of the original cubs, had perhaps made the most remarkable transformation. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense illness and injury in both species. The research medical bay was her domain now, where she worked alongside human doctors to provide care that combined the best of both worlds. "The monthly supply ship is approaching," Engineer Tom Bradley announced over the intercom. "Admiral Johnson sends her regards and says the Earth Council is still amazed by our progress reports." Emma smiled as she remembered those early days of fear and uncertainty. Research Station Alpha had grown from a desperate survival camp into a thriving community of 200 humans and nearly 50 thornbacks. The station now included laboratories, workshops, living quarters, and even schools where both species learned together. The success had not been without challenges. Some human colonists had arrived with prejudices against alien species, and some thornback packs had been suspicious of human intentions. But Scout, Hunter, and Shadow had served as living proof that cooperation was possible. They were the bridges that made everything else work. Captain Jake Morrison had returned to Earth after the first year, but he brought with him video recordings and research data that changed human perspectives on alien contact. The Kepler 442b colony had become a model for peaceful interspecies relations that was being studied by xenobiologists across human space. "Dr. Roberts, you need to see this," called research assistant Mark Davis from the main laboratory. "Hunter has made another breakthrough." Emma walked to the lab where Hunter was working with a team of human engineers on their latest project. The adult thornback had developed a new form of manufacturing that combined human precision technology with thornback natural instincts for material properties. "Show her the new composite material," Mark said excitedly. Hunter gestured toward a sample of what looked like ordinary metal, but when Mark demonstrated its properties, Emma gasped in amazement. The material was stronger than steel but flexible like rubber. It could conduct electricity better than copper but remained completely non-magnetic. Hunter developed this by understanding how certain forest plants create their cellular structures, Mark explained. He taught us to apply those same principles to metal fabrication. This could revolutionize manufacturing across human space. The communication device around Hunter's neck crackled to life with his translated voice. "Humans see individual pieces. Thornbacks see how everything connects. Together we see both. Better solutions come from both thinking." Emma nodded thoughtfully. This was exactly what she had hoped would happen when she first decided to stay on Kepler 442b. The combination of human analytical thinking and thornback intuitive understanding was producing innovations that neither species could achieve alone. Commotion outside drew her attention back to the observation deck. Scout was leading a procession of young thornbacks and human children toward the main settlement. They were carrying something large between them, working together with perfect coordination. "What are they bringing us now?" Tom Bradley asked, joining Emma at the window. The procession reached the station courtyard and set down their burden. It was a massive piece of crystalline stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Emma had never seen anything like it in 2 years of exploring the planet. Scout's communication device activated. Deep gift from Mountain Heart, for human, friends who stayed. For family that chose love over fear. Shadow approached the crystal and touched it gently with her nose. Her device translated her thoughts. It sings healing songs. Will help both species when bodies are broken. Found in sacred caves that only thornbacks knew before humans became family. Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes as she realized what this meant. The thornbacks had shared one of their most sacred secrets with the human colonists. This crystal, whatever its properties turned out to be, represented the deepest level of trust between species. "We should run some tests on this material," Mark said, already reaching for his scanners, but Emma held up her hand to stop him. "Later," she said quietly. "Right now we should just accept the gift with the respect it deserves." The supply ship landed an hour later, bringing new colonists, equipment, and messages from Earth. Among the passengers was Patricia Wells, the former nurse who had returned to Earth but could not forget her bond with Shadow. She had spent a year studying alien psychology and had returned to help establish the first interspecies medical program. Shadow recognized her immediately and bounded across the landing field with joyful barks. The reunion between human and Thornback brought tears to everyone who witnessed it. Patricia had aged in her year away, but Shadow looked exactly as she had when they first met, still showing the same gentle protectiveness that had saved Patricia's life during those first dangerous days. "I could not stay away," Patricia explained to Emma as Shadow pressed against her side like an enormous, affectionate dog. "Everything on Earth felt empty after experiencing this kind of connection. I belong here with them." As the sun set over Research Station Alpha, Emma gathered with the original volunteers and their Thornback friends around the same type of campfire they had used during those first frightening nights. But now the circle included dozens of humans and Thornbacks, all of them part of an extended family that spanned species. Scout, Hunter, and Shadow sat together near the fire, their eyes reflecting the flames as they watched the mixed gathering of their two peoples. They had grown from frightened cubs into leaders who bridged two worlds, proving that love and understanding could overcome any difference. Tom Bradley raised a cup of locally brewed fruit juice in a toast. "To Scout, Hunter, and Shadow," he said. "3 alien cubs who taught an entire galaxy that family is not about species, it is about choice." The humans and Thornbacks responded together, voices and vocalizations blending into a chorus of agreement that echoed across the valley. Emma looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the alien sky. Somewhere out there, other human ships were exploring other worlds looking for other forms of life. She hoped that when they found alien species, they would remember the lesson of Kepler 442b. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking predators could become the most devoted family members. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of galactic history. And sometimes 3 cubs who refused to abandon the strange creatures who had shown them love could teach 2 species how to build a better future together. The fire crackled peacefully as 2 species that had once been strangers continued writing their shared story under the light of alien stars.